The first flutter of movement, a delicate, butterfly wing sensation deep within me, should have been a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. Instead, it felt like a frantic tapping from the inside, a tiny prisoner rattling the bars of a gilded cage. My cage was the perfume hall of Harrods, a suffocating universe of clashing florals and ambers, where the very air was thick with opulence and expectation. "Olivia, dear, do try to focus." Margaret Cavendish's voice, cool and precise as a surgeon's scalpel, cut through the haze. The Penhaligon's Babylonia is the traditional choice, of course. A clean, powdery scent. One doesn't want the infant to be overwhelmed. I forced a smile, my hand instinctively splaying over the taut globe of my stomach. "It's lovely, Margaret." "It's appropriate," she corrected gently, her eyes, the same piercing blue as her son's, sweeping over me, assessing. She made a subtle gesture to the sales assistant, and another, even more expensive-looking bottle was produced. Though perhaps the creed is more distinctive. I felt like a specimen under glass. The wife of Xander Cavendish, heir to the Cavendish fortune and a significant portion of London, was expected to be a certain type of mother. Poised, polished, and perfumed with the correct, understated elegance. I was trying. God, I was trying. But today, the weight of the Cavendish name felt heavier than the child in my womb. The lights were too bright, the scents a nauseating assault. I needed air. I needed silence. "Margaret, would you excuse me for a moment?" "I just need to." I gestured vaguely towards the restrooms. A flicker of impatience crossed her perfectly composed features, but she nodded. "Of course. Don't be long. Sebastian and his wife are joining us for tea at the Ritz at 4. The mention of Sebastian, Xander's oldest and most insufferable friend, sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I gave another tight smile and fled, my heels sinking soundlessly into the plush carpet as I navigated the labyrinthine halls towards the sanctuary of the ladies' lounge. It was as opulent as the rest of the store, all marble and gold fixtures, with individual anterooms for privacy. I splashed cold water on my wrists, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face was fuller, my skin glowing as the pregnancy books promised, but my eyes held a faint, hunted look. I was Olivia Cavendish, living a life of unimaginable luxury, married to a man who was, by any objective measure, perfect. And yet, a persistent, quiet dread had taken root in my heart over these past few months, a weed thriving in the shadows of my happiness. The door opened, and the reflection of another woman appeared behind mine. My blood ran cold. Isabel, Leo's mother. She looked, as always, immaculate. A razor-sharp bob, a sheath dress that cost more than my first car, and a smile that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Olivia," she purred, her voice like poisoned honey. What a delightful surprise. Blooming, as they say. I turned slowly, my body a shield for my unborn child. "Isabel, I didn't know you were in town." "Oh, one must keep an eye on one's investments," she said airily, inspecting her perfect manicure. "And one's family, of course." "How is my Leo?" "Thriving, I hope, under your care." The slight pause before care was a masterclass in insult. She had never forgiven Xander for winning primary custody, for proving her an unfit mother not through malice, but through sheer, documented neglect. She saw me as an obstacle, a placeholder, the hired help who had somehow been given the keys to the nursery. "He's wonderful," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "He's at a football club session today. He's getting quite good." "How lovely for him." She took a step closer, her perfume, something dark and predatory, clashing violently with the powdery Babylonia that still clung to my skin. "And how are you finding it?" The final stretch. It must be so overwhelming. Xander can be so terribly focused. So ambitious. It's easy to feel sidelined. Her words were needles, each one finding a secret fear. Xander had been distant lately, buried in a new acquisition. His mind a million miles away from nursery colors and baby names. "We're managing just fine," I said, clutching the edge of the marble sink. "Of course you are." She gave a tinkling, humorless laugh. "He's a difficult man to truly know, isn't he?" All that charm and intensity on the surface, but so cold at the core. It's what makes him so successful, I suppose. He just takes what he wants and discards what he no longer needs. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. What are you trying to say, Isabel? Oh, nothing, darling. Nothing at all. She leaned in, as if to share a confidence, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I just think it's wonderful that you'll soon have your own child to focus on. It must be so challenging, loving another woman's son. It frees me up, you see. Now that you'll be so busy, I feel it's the perfect time for Leo and I to properly reconnect. A boy needs his real mother, after all. The world tilted. The polished marble, the gilded taps, Isabel's smug face, it all swam before my eyes. It wasn't just a barb. It was a threat. A promise to dismantle the family I had built, to take Leo from me just as I was bringing a new life into the world. The fear was instant, visceral, a cold, sharp blade sliding between my ribs. He's my son, I wanted to scream. In every way that matters, he is my son. But I said nothing. I just stood there, paralyzed, as she gave me one last, triumphant smile and swept out of the room, leaving only the ghost of her toxic perfume and the crumbling ruins of my peace. I found my way back to Margaret on autopilot, my smile a brittle mask. You look pale, Olivia, Margaret remarked, her gaze sharp. Just a bit tired, I murmured, the lye ash in my mouth. It's a lot. She patted my hand, a rare, brief gesture that felt more diagnostic than comforting. It's the price of admission, my dear. This life. Xander met us at the Ritz, looking devastatingly handsome and distracted. He kissed my cheek, his mind clearly still in some boardroom. Everything all right, Liv? He asked, his eyes scanning the room for Sebastian. Fine, I said, the word a hollow echo. He didn't press. He just accepted it, as he accepted everything these days, with a preoccupied nod. That night, the seeds Isabel had planted began to sprout into dark, tangled vines of doubt. Xander was working late again. The London penthouse was silent, a monument to tasteful isolation. Leo was asleep, his small, trusting face peaceful in the moonlight. I wandered into Xander's study, drawn by a need to feel close to him, to find some proof of the man I'd fallen in love with, the one who had looked at me as if I were the only soul in the universe. His tablet was on the desk, its screen dark. On a whim, I picked it up. He never kept it locked. He had no secrets, he'd always said. My thumb swiped, and the screen glowed to life. It was open to his messages. And there, at the top, was a name I didn't recognize, Chloe. The thread was short, but it was enough. Chloe, still thinking about that drink. You're a hard man to pin down, Xander Cavendish. Xander, it was a busy week. Chloe, too busy for fun? I'm free tomorrow night. That little bar in Soho? You know the one. Xander, I'll see what I can do. My breath hitched. You know the one. The implication was a physical blow. This wasn't a first invitation. This was a continuation. A secret. As if on cue, my mobile vibrated on the desk. It was Xander. I picked it up, my hand trembling, but before I could speak, I heard a burst of laughter in the background, a woman's laugh, bright and intimate. Don't worry, Sebastian has it covered, Xander was saying, his voice slightly muffled, as if he'd covered the receiver. He was clearly not talking to me. He was on another call. She's fine. A bit emotional, you know how it is, pregnant. He laughed, a low, conspiratorial sound that was utterly alien to me. No, don't be ridiculous. It's just convenient for now. Look, I've got to go. I'll see you tomorrow. Yes, you know the one. The line went dead. I stood there in the silent, opulent study, the tablet in one hand, my phone in the other. The evidence was circumstantial, flirtatious messages, a hushed, laughing phone call. But in the fertile soil of my newly seeded fears, watered by Isabel's venom, it felt like damning, irrefutable proof. The beautiful, perfect life I had built was nothing more than a facade, and underneath, the cracks were appearing, wide and deep enough to swallow me whole. The dread was no longer quiet. It was a scream, trapped behind my teeth, as I began my slow, silent withdrawal into a fortress of my own making. The scream did not escape that night. It turned inwards, solidifying into a cold, hard stone in my chest. I moved through the next day like a ghost haunting my own life. The cheerful clatter of cutlery at breakfast as Leo recounted his football exploits, the distant, efficient kiss Xander planted on my forehead before heading to the office, it was all a pantomime performed on the deck of a sinking ship. I watched Xander, searching for a flicker of guilt, a shadow of the man who had whispered promises in the dark. I saw only the same preoccupied stranger. The stone in my chest grew heavier with each passing, silent hour. Isabel's venom and the digital evidence on the tablet fused into a single, unshakable truth in my mind. By the time Xander returned home that evening, late again, the pressure had become unbearable. The need for answers, for some kind of catharsis, was a physical ache. I found him in his study, pouring a neat whiskey, his tie loosened and a day's worth of stubble shadowing his jaw. He looked tired, and for a fleeting second, I felt a pang of something, pity, perhaps. But it was quickly extinguished by the memory of that woman's laugh in the background of his call. "We need to talk," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. He sighed, taking a sip of the amber liquid. "Can it wait, Liv? It's been a hellish day. The Singapore deal is on the verge of collapse." "No," I said, the words sharp and final. "It can't." I stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind me with a soft, decisive click. "Who is Chloe?" The question hung in the air between us, stark and ugly. Xander stilled, his glass halfway to his lips. For a heartbeat, I saw it, a flash of something in his eyes. Not guilt, but surprise, followed by a swift, calculating shudders down. "Chloe," he repeated, his tone deliberately light. "A potential client." "Why? A client who texts you about drinks in Soho? A client you have a usual bar with?" My calm was beginning to fracture, a hairline crack in the ice. "I saw the messages, Xander. And I heard you on the phone last night, laughing with her, telling her I was emotional, that I was convenient for now. His face hardened. The tired, vulnerable man vanished, replaced by the Cavendish air, a man used to command, not interrogation. "You were snooping through my tablet? My private messages? You said you had no secrets." The crack widened, my voice rising. "Was that a lie too? Is everything a lie? Must you be so hysterical?" he snapped, slamming the glass down on the desk. Whiskey sloshed over the rim, a dark stain spreading on the polished wood. "Nothing happened. It's business. You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under. The expectations. Don't you dare call me hysterical." I shot back, the tears I'd been holding back now spilling over. "I'm 8 months pregnant with your child, and I find out my husband is arranging clandestine meetings with another woman and dismissing me as convenient. What am I supposed to be? Calm? This is exactly what I mean," he roared, throwing his hands up in frustration. "You're twisting everything. I am under immense stress, Olivia. This pregnancy, this entire domestic situation, it's a lot. For both of us. But I'm the one holding everything together." "The domestic situation?" I echoed, incredulous. "Is that what we are? A situation? And what does that mean? Is Leo part of this stressful situation? Am I?" The fight had taken on a life of its own, a wildfire consuming all the unspoken resentments and fears of the past months. We were no longer talking about Chloe. We were tearing down the foundations of our marriage with our bare hands. "You know what I mean," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "It's not easy, Olivia. Coming home to this atmosphere. The constant tension since you spoke to Isabel. Your paranoia." "My paranoia?" I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "She threatened to take Leo from me, Xander. She said a boy needs his real mother. And now I find you this." I gestured wildly, encompassing the phantom of Chloe, his coldness, the entire crumbling edifice of our life. "It feels connected. It feels like you're pulling away, leaving me alone to fight for a family you don't even seem to want anymore." "That's not true," he shouted, his control finally shattering. "God, you're so blind. You're so wrapped up in your own drama. You can't see what's right in front of you. Do you have any idea what I'm protecting us from?" "Protecting us?" I shot back, incredulous. "From what?" By having secret drinks with other women. His eyes blazed with a fury I had never seen before, a fury that was laced with a pain so profound it stole the air from my lungs. "You need to remember something, Olivia," he said, each word a shard of ice aimed directly at my heart. "You need to remember that Leo is my son. I am his parent. The only constant, stable parent he has ever had. You are not his mother." The world stopped. The angry red flush drained from his face the moment the words left his mouth, but it was too late. The damage was done. The words hung in the air, not just cruel, but annihilating. They erased the sleepless nights, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories, the whispered, "I love you, Mummy." They reduced 5 years of unconditional love to a legal technicality. I felt the blow physically, a seismic shock that buckled my knees. I staggered back, clutching my stomach, the baby within me kicking furiously, as if in protest. And then I saw him. A small figure standing in the crack of the doorway, his small hand still on the doorknob. Leo. His face, usually so bright and open, was a mask of utter devastation. His big, blue eyes, so like his grandmother's, were wide with a hurt so deep it seemed to swallow him whole. He had heard everything. "Leo," I whispered, my voice a broken thread. Xander spun around, his expression one of horror. "Son." But Leo didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on me, filled with a confusion that shattered what was left of my heart. Then, with a choked sob, he turned and fled down the hallway. The sound of his bedroom door slamming shut echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. The silence that followed was more deafening than the shouting. Xander stood frozen, his back to me, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The fight was gone from both of us, leaving only the wreckage. This was the breaking point. The point of no return. The stone in my chest had shattered, and the pieces were cutting me open from the inside. The two people I loved most in the world, Xander, the man I had chosen, and Leo, the son I had been given, were now the sources of the most profound pain I had ever known. One had denied the very core of my being, and the other had witnessed it. I looked at Xander's back, at the man who could wield such cruelty, and I knew, with a chilling, absolute certainty, that I could not stay. I could not raise my daughter in this beautiful, sterile cage where love was conditional and bonds could be broken with a single, vicious sentence. I could not let her grow up seeing her mother diminished, her brother's heart broken, her father a stranger. This was no longer a home. It was a gilded trap, built on lies and a foundation of sand. Without a word, I turned and walked out of the study. I didn't go to Leo. My comfort would be a lie now, a band-aid on a gaping wound. He needed to hear the words Xander had spoken, and he needed to hear them from the man who said them. I went in my own room, the master suite that now felt like a stranger's. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands resting on the frantic, living proof of my future. The scream was finally free, a silent, internal wail that shook me to my core. And in the echoing silence of that wail, a new, steely resolve began to form. A plan. It was time to stop being Olivia Cavendish, the porcelain doll in the gilded cage. It was time to become Olivia again. Just Olivia. A mother who would protect her children, both of them, no matter the cost. The withdrawal was over. The siege was about to begin. The steely resolve that had formed in the silent aftermath of the explosion did not waver over the next few days. It ossified. It became the skeleton that held me upright when my heart felt like it had been pulverized to dust. I moved through the penthouse like a wraith, performing the necessary functions of life, eating, sleeping, speaking when spoken to. But the woman who did these things was a shell. The real me was elsewhere, plotting, planning, gathering resources with the cold, focused intensity of a general preparing for a war of attrition. Xander existed in a parallel state of tense silence. The horror of what he had said, and Leo witnessing it, had clearly gutted him. He tried, in his clumsy, arrogant way, to bridge the chasm. A bouquet of white lilies, my favorite, appeared in the drawing room. He came home early one evening and attempted to engage Leo in a game of chess. But the flowers remained unsmelled, their funereal scent an insult. The chess game was a silent, miserable affair, Leo moving his pieces with a mechanical detachment that was far more damning than any tantrum. Leo was the true heartbreak. The bright, trusting light in his eyes had been extinguished. He was quiet, withdrawn, clinging to me with a desperate, silent intensity that shattered me anew every time I felt his small hand slip into mine. He didn't ask about the fight. He didn't mention his father's words. It was as if he had built a glass box around the memory and sealed himself inside with it. He called me Mummy once, his voice a tentative whisper, and when I gathered him into a fierce, wordless hug, he burst into tears, his small body shaking with sobs he couldn't articulate. The damage was done. Xander had not just broken my heart, he had fractured our son's world. My plan was simple, brutal, and necessary. I would wait until Charlotte was born. I would secure her passport, drain the secret account my father had insisted I maintain, a rainy day fund, he'd called it, and I now saw he'd meant a hurricane, and I would take my children. Leo and Charlotte. Both of them. I would disappear. Where, I didn't know yet. Somewhere Xander Cavendish's money and influence couldn't reach. It was a monumental, likely impossible task, but the alternative, staying, letting my daughter be raised in this emotional slaughterhouse, leaving Leo to be torn between his warring parents, was unthinkable. The first real contraction was a fist of iron, crushing the base of my spine. It was nothing like the practice Braxton Hicks. This was vicious and definitive. I gasped, doubling over the nursery's rocking chair, my knuckles white on the wood. It wasn't time. I had 3 weeks. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. My plan wasn't ready. I was vulnerable. Another thought, more terrifying than the pain, seized me. Xander was at the office. With her. I fumbled for my phone, my vision blurring. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. Again. Another contraction seized me, closer this time, stealing my breath. The pain was a catalyst, burning away reason and leaving only a raw, primal instinct. I couldn't have this baby here alone. I couldn't let him have this power. I had to see his face. I had to know. Leo. I called out, my voice strained. He appeared at the door, his eyes wide. We need to go see Daddy. Now. The car ride was a nightmare blur of gray London and escalating agony. I clung to Leo's hand, my body bowing with each fresh wave. Are you okay, Mummy? He asked, his voice small and scared. The baby is coming, I panted, the words a confession. We need to tell Daddy. We didn't wait for the receptionist. I marched, or rather, staggered, through the gleaming lobby, a pregnant woman clearly in distress, a silent, terrified child in my wake. Xander's assistant, James, leapt to his feet. Mrs. Cavendish. My God, are you? I pushed the heavy oak door open. The scene imprinted itself on my mind with the brutal clarity of a lightning strike. Xander, his shirt untucked. His face a mask of furious frustration. And Chloe, her blouse unbuttoned, her hands fumbling with the clasp of her skirt. Time stopped. The only sound was Leo's sharp, indrawn breath beside me. Xander's head snapped towards us. His anger morphed into pure, unadulterated shock, then a dawning horror that mirrored my own. Olivia. And it was the confirmation, the undeniable, sordid truth of it, that finally broke me. A pain, entirely different from the contractions, ripped through me. It was a searing, white-hot agony that started in my core and exploded outwards, a dam bursting. A gush of warm fluid soaked my legs, pulling on the priceless Persian rug. The baby, I gasped, my legs buckling. I clutched at the doorframe, my body convulsing as the world tilted and went black. The chaos was instantaneous. Oh my God. Chloe scrambled away, as if I were contagious. Olivia. Xander was across the room in 3 long strides, catching me as I slumped. His arms around me were the last place I wanted to be, but I had no strength to fight him. The pain was all-consuming, a tidal wave dragging me under. James. Call an ambulance. No. Xander roared, his voice raw with a panic I'd never heard before. I saw Leo, frozen in the doorway, his small face a terrified mask, staring at the scene, his disheveled father, the half-dressed woman, his mother collapsing on the floor. I tried to reach for him, to say his name, but another wave of pain stole my voice, my breath, my consciousness. The world narrowed to a tunnel of sound and agony. Sirens. Shouting. Xander's face, pale and desperate, hovering above me as he carried me into the elevator. Leo's quiet sobs from somewhere nearby. The cold London air hitting my sweat-soaked skin as we were loaded into the ambulance.
He had never known fear. Not true, gut-wrenching, mind-obliterating fear. He'd faced down hostile takeovers, navigated boardroom coups, stared down men who wanted to destroy him. That was calculation. This was primal. Olivia was dying in his arms. Her skin was gray, her breath shallow, ragged pants. The ambulance attendant was barking questions, but Xander couldn't process them. All he could see was the blood. So much blood, soaking through the blanket they'd laid over her. A dark, spreading stain of his own making. You need to remember that Leo is my son. You are not his mother. The words echoed in his head, a toxic mantra. He had said that to her. He had driven her to this. His rage, his frustration at her distance, at Isabel's poison, at the relentless pressure. It had all boiled over into the single most cruel sentence he could have ever uttered. And she had believed him. She had believed it so completely that she had felt the need to come to his office, to confront him with the evidence of another, lesser betrayal. Chloe. God, Chloe. A foolish, fleeting distraction. A pretty, ambitious junior associate at a law firm they were using for the Singapore deal. She'd been flirting relentlessly, and he, feeling emasculated and isolated at home, had let it happen. He'd met her for one drink weeks ago, a mistake he'd immediately regretted. Today, she'd shown up at his office unannounced, throwing herself at him, and he'd been in the process of forcibly, angrily, removing her when Olivia had walked in. It was a farce. A sordid, meaningless farce that had now triggered a tragedy. He looked down at Olivia's ashen face. This was his fault. All of it. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and shouted medical jargon. Placental abruption, precipitous labor, fetal distress. Get her 2 or 3 now. They ripped her from his arms, wheeling her through swinging double doors. A nurse stopped him. You can't go in there, sir. He stood, paralyzed, his shirt and hands stained with his wife's blood. He was vaguely aware of a social worker leading a shell-shocked Leo away. His son didn't look at him. Time lost all meaning. He paced the sterile, antiseptic-smelling waiting room, each second an eternity. His mind was a carousel of horrors. Olivia's body going limp in the ambulance. Leo's terrified eyes, the look of utter devastation on Olivia's face when she'd seen Chloe. He had to make a call. Margaret. His mother's voice, crisp and efficient on the phone, was a small anchor in the storm. I'll be there immediately. Is the child all right? I don't know, he whispered, his voice cracking. Mother. There's so much blood. A long pause. Be strong, Xander. For once in your life, be what they need you to be. The words were a lash. He had never been what they needed. He had provided, he had possessed, but he had not nurtured. He had taken Olivia's fierce, bright love and her devotion to Leo for granted, as if they were fixtures of the life he had built, like the art on the walls. A doctor emerged, his scrubs spattered with blood. Xander's heart stopped. Mr. Cavendish? Your wife has suffered a severe placental abruption, likely brought on by the extreme stress and physical shock. She's lost a significant amount of blood. We've delivered your daughter via emergency C-section. She's small, but she's stable. She's in the NICU as a precaution. And Olivia? The question was a plea. The doctor's face was grim. We've stopped the bleeding, but she's not out of the woods yet. She's under sedation in the ICU. The next 24 hours are critical. They let him see the baby. A tiny, red, squirming thing in an incubator. A cap of dark hair plastered to her scalp. She had Olivia's mouth. Charlotte, the name they'd chosen together in a happier time. He placed a trembling hand on the glass, a sob wrenching from his throat. This was his daughter, and he was alone with her. The irony was a physical blow. The thing he had been so ambivalent about, this new, demanding life, was now the only tangible piece of Olivia he had left.
I was drowning in a red haze. Pain was the ocean, and I was sinking. Voices echoed from a great distance, distorted and warped. BP dropping. 80/40. We need more O negative. Now, get the baby out. There was pressure, immense and tearing. Then a void. A feeling of being empty scooped out. A tiny, furious cry echoed somewhere, a sound from another universe. My baby, Charlotte. I tried to claw my way towards the sound, but the red haze was turning to black, pulling me down. Seduction. Warm, inviting nothingness. No. The thought was a spark in the darkness. Xander. He would take her. He would use my weakness, my unconsciousness, to take my daughter. He would hand her to a nanny, to his mother, to that woman, Chloe. He would tell her I wasn't strong enough. He would tell her I didn't want her. He had already erased me as Leo's mother. He would do the same with Charlotte. The spark became a flame. A fierce, burning defiance. I will not let him. I fought the drugs, the exhaustion, the lure of the void. I forced my eyes open. Slits of blinding white light. Tubes in my nose, in my arms. The beeping of machines was the soundtrack of my resistance. A blurry figure leaned over me. Xander. His face was haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. Liv. Oh, thank God. You're awake. Charlotte's perfect. She's beautiful. She looks like you. His voice was thick with emotion. It sounded real. But it was a lie. It had to be a lie. Everything was a lie. My throat was raw, my tongue a foreign object. I tried to speak, to demand my baby, but only a dry, rasping sound emerged. Shh, don't try to talk. You need to rest. You're safe. Safe? I was in the belly of the beast. Surrounded by his people, in a world he controlled. My eyes darted around, wild, searching for my child. Where is she? I managed to croak. In the NICU. Just for observation. I'll take you to see her soon, I promise. Promise. A worthless word. A Cavendish word. A nurse came in, cheerful and efficient. Time to check your vitals, Mrs. Cavendish. And then, perhaps, we can see about getting you to hold your little girl. Hold her. The thought was a lifeline. I clung to it. But when the time came, and they wheeled my bed into the NICU, the fear was a viper in my chest. Xander was there, standing by the incubator. He looked at me, his expression a complex map of hope and anguish. They lifted Charlotte, a tiny bundle swaddled in a white blanket, and placed her in my arms. The world stopped. She was so small, so impossibly light. Her face was a perfect, miniature rose. She smelled of innocence and newness. And as I looked down at her, as I felt the weight of her, the reality of her, a love so vast and terrifying erupted within me that it dwarfed the pain, the betrayal, the fear. This was my daughter. My blood. My soul. Outside my body. I looked from her perfect face to Xander's watchful one. And I knew, with a certainty that was deeper than bone, that I could not share her with him. He was a contaminant. A danger. The man who had broken Leo was not fit to hold Charlotte. He saw it in my eyes. The wall. The fortress. The love for my daughter that had no room for him. His face crumpled. Olivia. I didn't answer. I bent my head, my body curving around my daughter in a primal arc of protection. I breathed in her scent, and I made a new vow, silent and absolute. They could take the penthouse. They could take the money. They could try to take Leo. But they would not have her. They would not have me. The siege was not just beginning. In the quiet, sterile hum of the NICU, with my daughter's heartbeat against mine, the first battle had already been won. I had survived. And for her, I would burn their entire world to the ground. #### Part 4. The Silent Aftermath. The Cavendish country estate, Whitethorn, had always been a place of respite. Nestled in the rolling green hills of the Cotswolds, its honey-colored stone and wisteria-draped facades spoke of generations of quiet, unassailable privilege. Now it was the grandest prison in England. I was discharged a week after Charlotte's birth, my body stitched and hollowed, a vessel that had been emptied and returned. Its purpose served. Xander had arranged everything, of course. A private nurse met us at the London hospital, a silent, efficient woman who oversaw my transfer into the plush interior of the Bentley. Xander himself held Charlotte, her Caricata Stark, modern contraption against his bespoke suit. He tried to hand her to me once we were seated, a tentative offering of peace. I turned my head and looked out the window at the blurring city. After a moment, he placed the Caricot on the seat between us, a chasm dressed in polished leather and baby blankets. The physical silence of Whitethorn was a shock after the constant, mechanical beeping of the hospital. It was a deep, profound quiet, broken only by the whisper of ancient oaks in the wind and the distant, lonely call of a pheasant. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it was the silence of a tomb. I became a ghost in its halls. My footsteps on the worn Persian runners made no sound. I spoke only when necessary, my vocabulary reduced to monosyllables. Yes. No, thank you. My world contracted to 2 points of light, the warm, milky weight of Charlotte in my arms and the quiet, shadowed form of Leo, who drifted through the house like a lost page from a sad story. Xander was desperate. I could feel it radiating from him, a frantic energy that buzzed against the edges of my catatonia. He tried, in his clumsy, transactional way, to fix the unfixable. I fired Chloe, he announced one evening, standing in the doorway of the drawing room where I was nursing Charlotte. He said it with the finality of a king signing an execution order, expecting gratitude. She's been dismissed from her firm. She won't work in this city again. I didn't look up from Charlotte's face, from the perfect, rhythmic pulse of her temple. What did I care about Chloe? She was merely a symptom, a single spark from the inferno that was his character. It was a misunderstanding, Olivia, he pressed, his voice tight. She ambushed me. I was pushing her away when you arrived. You have to believe me. The word believe was a foreign currency, worthless here. I simply shifted Charlotte to my other breast, the movement a dismissal. He cut ties with Sebastian, his oldest friend and the source of so much toxic camaraderie. He started coming home from London at 5 o'clock sharp, his briefcase untouched for the rest of the evening. He filled the house with flowers, with absurdly expensive gifts, a diamond pendant, a first edition of a book I'd once mentioned loving. They accumulated in corners, unopened, their opulence an insult to the raw, bleeding reality of our situation. He was trying to rebuild the gilded cage, unaware that I had already picked the lock and was patiently, methodically, sawing through the bars. My focus was my escape. While the household slept, I was awake, the blue light of my tablet illuminating my face as I researched. Jurisdictions with no extradition treaties, countries where the Cavendish name would be just a name. I had no illusions about the difficulty. Xander would burn the world to find his heir, his daughter. But he would be looking for Olivia Cavendish, the porcelain wife. He would not be looking for the feral, resourceful creature I was becoming. My rainy day fund was substantial, but not enough for a lifelong war. So, I began to liquidate my assets. The jewelry was easiest. A diamond bracelet from our first anniversary, a sapphire necklace from his mother, the emerald earrings I'd worn to the charity gala where he'd proudly announced my pregnancy. I sold them through a discreet, anonymous online concierge service for the fabulously wealthy looking to offload gifts from ex-lovers. The prices were a pittance of their worth, but the transfers to my secret account were untraceable. Next were the clothes. The couture dresses, the cashmere coats, the handbags that cost more than a family car. I packaged them with clinical efficiency, my past self folded away in tissue paper and sent to consignment boutiques in Paris and Tokyo. Each box that left Whitethorn felt like shedding a skin, the weight of my old life lightening with every click of the sale-confirmed email. The emotional intensity in the house was a thick, suffocating fog. We were 3 planets orbiting a dead star, trapped in a silent, gravitational dance of misery. Xander would watch me, his gaze a physical weight, his frustration a barely contained storm. I would feel his eyes on me as I rocked Charlotte, as I read a story to Leo, my voice a flat, emotionless monotone. He was waiting for a crack, a sign of the woman he'd married. But that woman was gone. She had bled out on the floor of his office. Leo was the silent casualty, the walking wound. He spent hours in his room or wandering the vast grounds, his small shoulders slumped under a burden he was too young to carry. He ate his meals in silence, his eyes darting between Xander and me, a tiny seismograph registering every tremor of our disintegrating world. He had stopped calling me Mummy. Now it was a hesitant, heartbreaking Olivia, as if he was no longer sure he had the right. One afternoon, I was in the nursery, packing a small bag for Charlotte. It was a test run, a practice for the real thing. I was folding a tiny cashmere blanket, imagining the feel of a different air, a smaller, safer room, when I felt a presence in the doorway. I turned. Leo stood there, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his face pale and set. "You're going to leave, aren't you?" he said. His voice was quiet, but it held a terrifying, adult certainty. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. The tiny blanket slipped from my fingers. The air left my lungs. "Leo, you're going to take her," he continued, his blue eyes, so like his father's, now filled with a desolation that belonged to no child. "And you're going to leave me behind." The words were a physical blow, a sledgehammer to the foundation of my soul. I staggered back a step, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a cry. In all my planning, in all my frantic, desperate scheming, I had constructed a narrative of rescue. I was the mother lion, saving her cubs from a dangerous, predatory world. But in Leo's eyes, I saw the truth I had been too cowardly to face. From his perspective, I wasn't saving him. I was choosing Charlotte over him. I was replicating the very abandonment he had suffered at the hands of Isabel. I was becoming her. "No," I whispered, the word a broken thing. "Oh, Leo, no. Never." "He said you're not my mother," Leo said, his voice trembling now, the dam of his composure breaking. "And if you're not my mother, then you don't have to take me. You can just take your real baby and go." The agony was absolute. It was a white-hot fire that consumed every other thought, every plan, every ounce of my resolve. I crossed the room in 2 strides and fell to my knees before him, my hands gripping his small, bony shoulders. "Look at me," I begged, my voice raw, tears streaming down my face, unchecked and unheeded. "You look at me, Leo Cavendish. You are my son. In my heart, in my soul, in every breath I take, you are my son." What your father said, it was cruel, and it was wrong, and it came from a place of such ugliness that I can barely stand to look at him. But it does not change one single thing about how I feel for you. I pulled him into my arms, crushing him against me, feeling the frantic beat of his heart against my chest. He was so small, so breakable. "I would never, ever leave you behind," I choked out, the vow torn from the deepest, most sacred part of me. "Do you understand me? Never. You and Charlotte, you are both my children. You are my world. If I go, we go together. I promise you. I swear it on my life." He clung to me then, his small body shaking with silent, racking sobs, all the fear and confusion of the past weeks finally finding their release. I held him, rocking him back and forth on the floor of the nursery, my own tears soaking his hair. The confrontation shattered me. It laid bare the impossible contradiction at the heart of my plan. Taking Leo was kidnapping. It would unleash the full, terrifying power of the Cavendish Empire. Xander would pursue us to the ends of the earth, and the law, his law, would be on his side. Isabel would swoop in, a vulture claiming her maternal rights. It was a battle I could not win with mere money and fake passports. But abandoning Leo was not an option. It was a betrayal of my very soul. The seed of a mother's love I had planted for him 5 years ago had grown into a great, immovable tree, its roots tangled inextricably with my own being. To tear it out would kill me as surely as any physical wound. That night, as I lay in the grand, lonely master bedroom, Charlotte sleeping in a bassinet beside me, I stared into the darkness. The steely resolve of my planning was gone, replaced by a vast, desolate hopelessness. I was trapped. The cage was not gilded, it was forged in the unbreakable chains of a mother's love for 2 children, a love that pulled me in 2 impossible directions. The siege was over before it had begun. I was the one under siege, besieged by love, by law, by the cruel, unyielding reality of my situation. And as the first gray light of dawn touched the windows, I had no plan, no escape, no hope. Only the certain, crushing knowledge that I was well and truly caught. The days following my confrontation with Leo bled into one another, a monochrome wash of rain against the leaded windows of Whitethorn. The frantic energy of my planning had evaporated, leaving behind a heavy, cold sludge of despair. The secret account, the sold jewels, the researched destinations, it all felt like the pathetic scribblings of a madwoman. I was trapped, not by gilded bars, but by the two tiny, beating hearts that held mine hostage. The choice was an impossible equation. To stay was to accept a life of quiet desolation, to model for my children a marriage that was a hollowed-out shell, a lesson in how love could curdle into bitter coexistence. It was to subject Leo to a lifetime of this tense, silent warfare and to raise Charlotte in a home where her father's presence was a source of pain and her mother's was a ghost. But to go was to tear our family in two. To leave Leo behind was an act of such profound betrayal that I knew the guilt would poison me, and eventually my relationship with Charlotte. To take him was to become a fugitive, to condemn him to a life of looking over his shoulder, of stolen identities and rootless fear. Xander would never stop. The Cavendish machine would grind on, relentless, and it would find us. I was paralyzed, caught on the horns of a dilemma of my own making. The love I had for my children, which I had believed was my greatest strength, had become my ultimate cage. A week after my breakdown with Leo, the paralysis broke. It was not a moment of clarity, but one of sheer, unendurable pressure. Xander had been making a visible, almost pathetic effort. He was home for dinner every night, attempting stilted conversation, his eyes perpetually shadowed with a plea I could not answer. That morning, he had tried to give Charlotte a bottle. His large, capable hands, which could command billions, fumbled with the tiny thing. She had started to cry, a thin, wailing sound, and he had looked at me, utterly lost. The sight of it, his helplessness, her distress, ignited a fresh, searing wave of anger. This was the man who held our fates in his hands? This clumsy, emotionally stunted stranger? The anger was a catalyst. It burned away the hopelessness and left behind a cold, clear decision. I could not stay. The alternative was a slow, spiritual death for all of us. I would go to Edinburgh, to the safe, anonymous life I had planned. I would take Charlotte. And I would find a way to get Leo later. It was a desperate, illogical plan, the kind born of a breaking point. I would establish a new life, secure a base, and then, somehow, I would fight for him from there. It was a fantasy, but it was the only thread of hope I had left to cling to. The day I chose was overcast, the sky a solid sheet of gray wool, pressing down on the verdant Cotswold hills. I moved through the morning with a surreal calmness. I dressed Charlotte in a warm, practical outfit, not one of the dozens of delicate, hand-smocked dresses from Harrods. I packed a single, large bag with essentials for both of us, diapers, formula, a few changes of clothes, my passport, and the fake one I'd procured for Charlotte. The bag containing the remnants of my old life, the couture, the jewels I left in the wardrobe. Let the moths have them. My heart was a frantic, caged bird against my ribs as I went to find Leo. He was in the library, perched on a vast leather armchair, his legs dangling, a large book of maps open on his lap. He looked so small, swallowed by the scale of the room and the knowledge it contained. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally bright. "I'm taking Charlotte into the village for a bit. To see the ducks." He looked up from a detailed drawing of the Amazon rainforest, his blue eyes clear and knowing. He didn't believe me. The lie was ash in my mouth. "Okay," he said softly. He closed the book and slid off the chair. He walked over to me and wrapped his arms tightly around my waist, burying his face in my sweater. He didn't say anything. He just held on, as if he could anchor me to the spot through sheer force of will. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and sharp. I knelt down, clutching him to me, breathing in the clean, little voice scent of him. "I love you, Leo. More than anything in this world. You remember that. No matter what. You are my brave, wonderful boy." It was too much. It was a goodbye. I felt him stiffen in my arms. He pulled back, his eyes searching mine, and in their depths, I saw a sorrow that was far too old for his face. He knew. "I love you, Mummy," he whispered. The word was a gift and a condemnation. I kissed his forehead, a hard, desperate press of my lips, then stood up, my legs trembling. I couldn't look at him again. If I did, I would crumble. I picked up my bag, adjusted Charlotte in her sling against my chest, and walked out of the library, out of the grand front door of Whitethorn, and onto the long, graveled drive. Each step away from the house was an agony. The crunch of the gravel under my shoes was the sound of my own heart breaking. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but I was burning up from the inside. Charlotte, lulled by the rhythm of my walking, slept peacefully, her warm weight a tangible reminder of the life I was choosing, and the one I was, for now, abandoning. I focused on the iron gates at the end of the drive, a quarter of a mile away. They were my finish line, my point of no return. I was almost there. My hand was reaching for the cold, ornate metal of the gate latch when the purr of a powerful engine cut through the stillness. A black Range Rover slid to a halt, blocking the narrow lane beyond the gates. The driver's door opened and Xander got out. He didn't slam the door. He didn't storm towards me. He just stood there, leaning against the vehicle, his shoulders slumped. He was wearing a simple, dark jumper and jeans, a stark contrast to his usual city armor. He looked tired and utterly defeated. My body went rigid. The fight or flight response screamed through me, but my feet were rooted to the spot. This was it. The confrontation I had dreaded. He would command. He would threaten. He would use Leo as a weapon. But he didn't. "I knew you'd go today," he said, his voice quiet, carrying easily in the still air. "You've been resolved this morning. Different." I said nothing. My arms tightened around Charlotte. "I'm not here to stop you, Olivia." The words were so soft, so devoid of his usual authority, that I wondered if I had misheard. "What?" He pushed off from the car and took a few steps towards the gate, stopping a few feet from me, careful not to crowd me. His eyes, the same piercing blue as Leo's, were red-rimmed and raw. "I'm not here to stop you," he repeated. "I came to give you this." He held out a single, plain key and a folded piece of paper. "It's a flat. In Edinburgh. New town. It's quiet. Safe. It's in your name. And I've transferred £5 million into your account. The one you thought I didn't know about. It's enough. To look after yourself and Charlotte. To be free." I stared at the key, then at his face, my mind reeling. This was a trick. A new, more sophisticated form of control. But his expression held no guile, no calculation. Only a profound, bone-deep sorrow. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "Because I love you," he said. The words simple and stark. "And I have spent the last few weeks watching you die inside that house, and I finally understood that I am the sickness. My pride, my ambition, my bloody fear, it's a poison. And I am poisoning you. I am poisoning Leo." His voice broke on our son's name. "I can't do it anymore. If the only way to keep a part of you alive, to keep Charlotte safe and for Leo to have a mother who isn't a ghost, is to let you go, then I will let you go." The dam inside me, the fortress of ice and steel I had built around my heart, shattered. It did not crack, it exploded. A sound tore from my throat, a raw, guttural scream that had been trapped for months. It was a scream of pain, of rage, of betrayal, of sheer, unadulterated agony. It echoed in the quiet country lane, startling a flock of birds from a nearby tree. "I hate you," I screamed, the tears now flowing freely, a torrent of hot, salty release. "I hate you for making me choose. I can't leave him. He's my son." I collapsed to my knees on the cold, damp gravel, my body convulsing with sobs. I clutched Charlotte to me, her own cries now joining mine, a tiny, frightened counterpoint to my wails. All the composure, the silent endurance, the calculated planning, it all disintegrated, leaving only the raw, bleeding nerve of a mother torn in two. Xander was on his knees in front of me in an instant, his hands hovering, wanting to comfort but not daring to touch. I know, he whispered, his own voice thick with tears. I know, my love. I know. You broke him. I sobbed, the words ripped from me. You broke his heart. And you broke me. How could you say that? How could you tell me I'm not his mother? It was the most vile, cruel thing I have ever said, he said, his head bowed in shame. And I will regret it until the day I die. I was angry and scared, and I wanted to hurt you because I felt you pulling away. I saw Isabel's poison working on you, making you doubt me, and I felt powerless. So I struck at what I knew would hurt you most. It was the act of a coward. I rocked back and forth, the storm of my grief slowly beginning to subside, leaving me hollowed out and exhausted. The truth of his sacrifice, the key, the money, the letting go, had disarmed me completely. The control I had fought so hard against, he had relinquished. And in doing so, he had finally shown me a love that was not about possession, but about release. The woman. Chloe, I said, the name of foul taste in my mouth. A distraction, he said, his gaze steady and honest. A stupid, pathetic attempt to feel something other than the terror I was feeling. You were so distant, so consumed with the baby and with Leo, and I felt obsolete. And then there was the fear. Fear of what? Of losing you, he said, his eyes glistening. The doctor, after Leo was born, Isabel, she had postpartum psychosis. It was mild, but it was real. She became paranoid, violent. She tried to harm herself, and she threatened Leo. It was the primary reason I fought for and won custody. It wasn't just neglect. And when you became pregnant, I was terrified. Terrified that the stress, the pressure of our life, would trigger something similar in you. I saw you pulling away, I saw the haunted look in your eyes, and I thought history was repeating itself. My strategy, my idiotic, arrogant strategy, was to create a shield. To have a meaningless flirtation in my pocket, something to blame your potential instability on, to protect myself from the pain of potentially losing you to an illness. I was trying to control a narrative instead of being the husband you needed. I was trying to diagnose you instead of loving you. I drove you to the brink with my own fear. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. His distance, his preoccupation, his cruel words, they were not the actions of a man who didn't care, but of a man who cared too much, and in the most broken, dysfunctional way possible. He had been trying to build a dam against a flood he imagined was coming, and in the process, he had caused the very catastrophe he feared. We knelt there on the gravel, two broken people surrounded by the evidence of their mutual destruction. The anger was gone, burned away in the catharsis of my scream. All that was left was a vast, aching emptiness and the faint, fragile possibility of something new. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I whispered, the truth of it a dull ache. I don't expect you to, he said. Not today. Not for a long time. But let me try. Not for me. For us. For our family. For Leo, who needs his mother whole and his father present. For Charlotte, who deserves to know a father who isn't a monster and a mother who isn't a ghost. Let me try to rebuild, Olivia. Let me earn the right to stand beside you again. He didn't move. He simply waited, his offer of freedom, the key, the flat, the money still lying on the gravel between us. The ultimate choice was now, finally, mine. I looked down at Charlotte, her cries having softened to whimpers, her face blotchy and red. I thought of Leo, waiting in the library, his heart already fractured. I thought of the cold, anonymous flat in Edinburgh, a life of solitude and fear. And I looked at Xander, not as the powerful Cavendish heir, but as a man brought to his knees, offering up his pride and control in a desperate, last-ditch attempt to save the only thing that truly mattered. The path of escape stretched out before me, a road to a lonely freedom. The path back to the house was one of arduous, painful, uncertain healing. With a shuddering breath that felt like the first real breath I had taken in months, I made my choice. I didn't pick up the key. Slowly, stiffly, I got to my feet. Xander rose with me, his eyes never leaving my face, a flicker of desperate hope in their depths. I didn't look at him. I turned my back on the open gate, on the waiting car, on the road to a new life. I adjusted Charlotte in her sling, soothing her with a soft murmur. Then, without a word, I began to walk. I walked back up the long, gravel drive, towards the honey-colored stone of whitethorn, towards the sun I had almost left behind. After a moment, I heard his footsteps behind me, not beside me, but following, giving me space. A silent acknowledgement that the path back would be led by me at my pace. The house loomed larger with each step. It was no longer just a prison or a gilded cage. It was a ruin, yes, but a ruin that could be rebuilt. The siege was over. The war was, for now, at a ceasefire. The long, slow, painful work of peace was about to begin. And as I walked, with my daughter against my heart and my husband a respectful distance behind, I felt not joy, not relief, but a single, fragile seed of possibility take root in the scorched earth of my soul.